Hi grade 4s, this video is to complement lesson 10, unit 5 of our Math Makes Sense books, but it's our second lesson on decimals because we split up the unit into fractions and decimals. So lesson 2 is all about exploring the hundredths place value. But before we jump into our next place value, let's quickly review what we learned about yesterday when we talked about the place value tenths. So yesterday we learned that in addition to our place value chart that we've been using all year, the one we know so well, hundredths, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, I already said 10,000, 100,000s. Miss King's getting messed up in her mind. Oops. We learned that in addition to all those place values to the left, we learned that there's actually place values to the right as well. Okay? So we talked about how after our ones place value, there's actually a decimal place there. Okay? And then followed by, that decimal place is followed by our tenths place value. Okay? And we mentioned yesterday that there are 10 tenths in one whole. And an example we used to kind of discuss that in that video that was shot even worse than this one, is money. So we talked about how a dollar could represent the unit one whole dollar. Won't buy you too much, unfortunately, anymore. But one whole dollar will represent our ones column. And then our tenths column is represented by the silver coin that has that boat on it, right? The 10-cent coin, the dime, okay? So that is representing our tenths column. Okay, when we talked about our tenths as representing 10 in one whole, we showed briefly that we could draw a decimal grid with a whole base 10 block here split into 10 equal sections. So if you counted, I know that my lines are not very straight, unfortunately, but you can see that there's 10 sections, okay? So if I wanted to represent the fraction 3/10, how many of those sections would I need to color in? Hopefully you guys all said 3. So I would be coloring in 1, 2, 3 sections of that chart and just color them in completely. I am going to be doing something else with my chart in a second, so I'm not going to actually color them in, but you can imagine that there's 3 thick black lines there, super thick, okay? Then I know that I can express this fraction as a decimal as well using my new and improved 10th place value. So I don't have any holes here, so I need a 0 before my decimal. Then I need that decimal, which we call and when we read it. And then our next place value is that tenths column. So we can just put a 3 in there, and then that is our decimal. So 3/10 is equal to 0 and 3/10. Okay? So that was just a quick little review from yesterday of our tenths. But now we're going to be expanding our place value chart by one more component or one more label. So in addition to our ones, our tenths, now we have something we call hundredths. So it makes it kind of easy to remember because to the left of our decimal we have ones, tens, and hundreds. Okay, so to the right of our decimal, after our ones, we have tenths and hundredths. So it kind of goes opposite directions, right? So that makes it a little easier to remember our names. We just need to remember that sound at the end, okay? Because that's what differentiates between tens and tenths and hundreds and hundredths, right? Makes, again, I'm going to say, be a snake when we're pronouncing our decimal place values, okay? So just like we said it would take 10 dimes to make a dollar, we said that there was a pattern yesterday of tens. So is there a coin that exists that you need 100 of them in order to make one whole dollar? Can we think about that? So we have our dimes, we have our loonie. Is there a coin that exists that we need 10 of them to make a dime? or we need 100 of them to make $1? Let's think about that. Well, kind of a trick question for some of us because in your lifetime, maybe you haven't experienced this coin as much. But there's actually a coin out there that's called a penny. And a penny is like this little coppery coin, and I wish I had one for you, but I smashed my piggy bank and I don't. But a penny is worth 1 cent. So there are 10 needed in order to make a dime, and 100 are needed in order to make $1. So that coin would represent our hundredths place value really nicely. Okay, so when we talk about our hundredths place value, we can think of it as being 1 over 100 to represent that fraction. Okay, so, sorry, I just had to grab this marker away from my dog, so just bear with me. She's getting into trouble as I'm trying to film this video. So, when we talk about our decimal grid, we can also represent our decimal grid for hundredths. So just like I had my grid for tenths, I can make a new grid for hundredths, and I'm going to turn this one into a hundredths grid. Any guesses how? So right now it's split into 10 sections. Well, while I do it, I'm going to see if anyone gets the right answer of how I'm going to make this into a hundredths grid. Did anybody guess that I was going to be drawing lines in the opposite direction? So now, on my hundreds grid, I have 10 going down and 10 going across. Okay, so I know that 10 times 10 equals 100. So I have 100 little bitty squares there. Okay, so this is a grid that can help us represent the hundredths place value. Okay, so if I have a fraction of, let's say, 2 over 100. 2 over 100. How many squares do you think I'm going to color in to represent 2 out of 100? If you said 2, you were correct. So I could represent that by this drawing here. Then if I wanted to represent it as a decimal place, I could draw it using my place value chart. Okay, so again, I'm thinking about my ones place value first. Do I have any holes here? I don't think so. So I have 0. Then I'm going to put my decimal. And then how many tenths do I have? Ooh, how many groups of 10 do I have here? Hopefully you said I have 0. Okay, and then finally I have 2 hundredths. Okay, so I need a 2 in my hundredths place. So this fraction, 2 over 100, is represented by the fraction 0 and 2 hundredths. 0 and 2 hundredths. Notice how I don't say 0 and 0 tenths 2 hundredths. That would be way too confusing. Again, I'm trying to be minimal in my speech, but I want to make sure that I'm expressing my meaning. Okay, so 0 and 2 hundredths would be the correct way to read this. Okay, so let's go through one more example together before I send you off to do some work. And the fraction we're going to be talking about today next is, let's do 20 over 100. So I have 20 over 100. How many of these little squares do you think I'm going to color in? If you said 20, you are correct. So one quick way to do it is I could count my squares individually as I count them, but I know because I drew this or because the ones that you use in your textbook are going to be perfect, I know that there are 10 in each row and 10 in each column. So I could just color in 2 complete lines, okay? So I'm going to color in 1 row, 2 rows. Okay, so I have 2 rows of 10 each, so 20 out of 100. Okay. So when I am writing this as my place value, okay, I'm going to notice, ooh, sorry. So I need to think about how I'm going to write this as a decimal, okay? My first question is, do I have any holes? Do I have any squares that are completely colored in? I don't, so I'm going to put my 0, okay? Then I'm going to put my decimal, because I know my decimal comes directly after my ones place. Then I'm going to ask, how many, do I have any tenths? Do I have any groups of 10? I do. I have 2 groups of 10. 2 groups of 10 equals 20, right? So 20 over 100 could be written like that. Okay, so notice how I didn't write my decimal as 0.02, okay, even though so notice how I didn't put the 2 in the hundredths column. Okay, because these 2 fractions, or these 2 decimals are very, very different, okay? This fraction would again mean that there were only 2 little guys colored in, right? But I actually have 2 complete rows. So we need to put our 2 in the tenths place. So you can kind of think of it as the last digit of that decimal is going to go into the hundredths place. So the 0 for the hundredths could actually be written right here in the hundredths place, okay, because that's 2 digits after our ones, okay? Just like if I was to have the fraction instead, if I was to change my fraction to 25, okay, and I was to color in my extra 5 lines, okay, so I have 25 over 100 now. I want my last digit of the hundredths in my hundredths place value, okay? So I know that that 5 has to go into my hundredths place, okay? So I know that 5 needs to go there, so I know that 2 needs to go there, okay? So please go and practice. You're welcome to watch this video as many times. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments about this. I apologize, I'm still learning to use this technology the best I can, so I apologize sometimes my movements are not very smooth, but it's now your time to go practice. You guys can work through your Math Makes Sense booklet on pages 94 and 95, exploring hundredths. There's going to be lots of resources posted onto our class website as well. If you have any additional questions or want some extra practice with this, go ask your parents about that penny and how it can help us represent our hundredth place value. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Good luck on your work.